After 8 months of manipulation, I discovered that my own mother was using a fake profile, pretending to be me to seduce colleagues and clients of the multinational where I worked, destroying in an instant the 7 years of career I had taken to build. The explicit message appeared on my corporate computer screen on a hot, stuffy Tuesday afternoon in March. The central air conditioning of the 20th floor fighting uselessly against the tropical heat that transformed São Paulo into a suffocating urban greenhouse. While I reviewed for the third consecutive time the quarterly financial spreadsheets that needed to be impeccable for the next day's presentation to the board of directors of the multinational auditing and consulting firm, where I had worked for 7 years, methodically building a reputation for technical excellence and absolute reliability, and the detailed and grotesquely explicit sexual content specifically directed at me with my full name obsessively repeated in each paragraph, supposedly sent by Rafael Mendonça from the internal audit department 3 floors below, made me instantly spill the hot imported Colombian coffee I was holding absently over the 500 real ergonomic keyboard while my face burned with a nauseating mixture of deep shame, paralyzing confusion, and growing horror at that completely inappropriate approach that violated all the professional conduct protocols I had memorized on my first day of work. Carolina, my sweet and irresistible Carolina. I can't stand this torture of seeing you every day in the corridors pretending there is nothing between us, maintaining this cold professional mask while my entire body burns with unsatisfied desire. Our virtual nightly encounters that extend until 3 in the morning have left every cell of my being in uncontrollable flames. I urgently need to touch you in person. Feel the softness of your brown skin against mine. Explore every curve I've memorized through the photos you sent me. Realize in physical reality all those elaborate fantasies and passionate promises we've shared during endless months of intimate conversations that have completely consumed me, said the initial message of an email thread that continued for 7 more, progressively more explicit and disturbing paragraphs, accompanied by compromising photographs that clearly violated not only all corporate policies on workplace harassment, but also various laws on sexual harassment and non-consensual exposure of intimate images. My first visceral instinct, after the initial shock that left me temporarily paralyzed, staring fixedly at the screen as if it could magically reveal that it was some kind of elaborate, distasteful prank, was to immediately rise from my desk in the open space office where dozens of other accountants and analysts worked at their own stations, run through the hallways carpeted in neutral corporate gray towards the Human Resources Department on the 15th floor to report that unbelievable absurdity before anyone else could see and start destructive rumors. But something indefinable yet persistent in the wording of that disturbing message made me pause with my hand already on the mouse to close the window. Rafael mentioned with frighteningly specific details, intimate conversations about childhood traumas, elaborate sexual preferences, and romantic fantasies that I absolutely, categorically, unquestionably never had with him or any other colleague throughout my meticulously managed professional career, described virtual meetings on specific platforms with exact times that could be verified but never actually happened in reality, and especially made references to romantic promises of a shared future, moving to a new city together, even marriage and children, which I certainly had not made to anyone in the professional environment where I always maintained an extremely reserved, formal, and deliberately distant posture from any situation that could generate ambiguous interpretations. My 35 years of professional life meticulously built on unshakable foundations of impeccable technical competence, demonstrated through international certifications earned with personal sacrifice, irreproachable ethical behavior that made me refuse even small gifts from suppliers to avoid any appearance of impropriety, and especially the absolute and insurmountable separation between carefully compartmentalized personal life and corporate environment where I projected an image of asexual professionalism, seemed to be catastrophically crumbling before that message that suggested with apparently concrete evidence an elaborate, passionate, and sexually explicit clandestine romantic involvement that simply did not exist in any reality except in the disturbed mind of whoever had created that destructive fiction. During all the years working at that multinational auditing and consulting firm with offices in 40 countries and billion-dollar revenue, I had established through conscious and consistent effort a solid reputation as a technically competent but personally enigmatic and extremely discreet senior accountant, religiously avoiding with almost monastic discipline any social situation, informal happy hour, or casual interaction that could generate gossip, misunderstandings, or romantic interpretations about my professional conduct. especially after an emotionally devastating and financially catastrophic divorce 3 years earlier that had taught me through visceral pain unforgettable lessons about the dangers of mixing feelings with the workplace and the fragility of relationships that seemed solid but dissolved like sugar in hot water when tested by real pressures. The physical and psychological sensation of seeing my professional reputation, earned through thousands of hours of hard work, sacrificed weekends, ignored holidays, and minimized social life, being attacked by completely false but disturbingly detailed accusations was like helplessly watching an arson fire slowly, methodically, sadistically consuming a house that I had built brick by brick during years of tireless dedication that cost me personal relationships, social opportunities, and precious moments that I could never recover. Each word of that message was like gasoline thrown on the flames that threatened to consume not only my current career but any future possibility of professional reconstruction in an industry where reputation was a more valuable currency than technical competence, and where rumors of sexual impropriety could permanently destroy promising careers in a matter of days, regardless of truthfulness or context. Raphael kept sending increasingly explicit, desperate, and disturbingly specific messages through the company's internal communication system that supposedly had filters and monitoring, but was apparently not detecting the clearly inappropriate content. Each new sound notification making my stomach contract in painful spasms of growing anxiety that threatened to transform into a complete panic attack while I desperately, frantically, obsessively tried to understand how that surreal, Kafka-esque, impossible situation had developed completely without my knowledge, participation, or even suspicion that something was wrong. Carolina, my obsessive love, I know perfectly well that you're deliberately ignoring me now in the office to maintain the professional appearances that conservative management requires, playing the role of distant colleague while inside you burn with desire like I do. But you cannot deny the deep, spiritual, cosmic connection we developed during our conversations that swept through dawn after dawn, while the rest of the world slept unaware of the passion we built word by word. Do you perfectly remember that specific Thursday night 3 weeks ago when you sent me those 15 intimate photos wearing that red French lace lingerie you bought especially to tease me? When you solemnly promised with words I engraved in my memory that we would be much more than virtual lovers as soon as we got an opportunity to be alone without security cameras and the curious glances of jealous colleagues. He insisted in progressively longer and more elaborate messages, describing specific details of romantic and sexual interactions that made me seriously question my own mental sanity, my memory, my perception of reality. Was it remotely possible that I was suffering from some kind of selective amnesia, psychological dissociation, or even multiple personality disorder that made me completely forget elaborate romantic conversations and passionate virtual encounters with work colleagues while maintaining perfect memory of all other aspects of my life? My rational mind, trained in logical analysis through years of working with numbers, data, and objective financial realities, desperately struggled like a shipwreck victim clinging to debris to find logical, rational, scientific explanations for that professional nightmare that threatened to destroy not only years of careful building of corporate credibility, but also my own understanding of who I was as a person and professional. Perhaps Raphael was confusing my identity with another Carolina in some different department of the company that employed thousands of people. Perhaps he was the victim of some elaborate virtual scam where sophisticated criminals were impersonating me through deepfakes and advanced social engineering. Or perhaps he was deliberately, maliciously, sadistically inventing these stories for some perverse reason I couldn't understand. Revenge for some imaginary rejection, attempt at emotional blackmail, or simply sick pleasure in destroying others' reputations. But his messages were too detailed with information that only someone with intimate access could know. Too specific mentioning verifiable dates, times, and platforms. Too intimate describing personal preferences and secrets that I shared only with very close friends. To be completely fabricated from nothing. He mentioned with disturbing precision personal information about my life that only someone very close could know, including the name of my first childhood dog, the nickname my deceased father used to call me, my specific seafood allergy that few knew about. Described preferences and tastes that were genuinely mine, from obscure music I listened to out of print books I collected, and especially made references to recent company events like the year-end party where I had worn a specific blue dress, or the tense budget meeting where I had defended controversial cuts, creating a disturbingly convincing narrative, almost impossible to refute without concrete evidence, of an elaborate virtual relationship that I knew with absolute, visceral, fundamental certainty had never existed in any form or dimension. I decided after half an hour of anxious paralysis and destructive internal debate to confront Raphael directly, personally, eye to eye, before escalating the situation to senior management or human resources that would certainly transform the incident into a formal investigation with all the devastating consequences that would imply. Desperately, naively, pathetically hoping that a frank, honest, and adult conversation could clarify what obviously, necessarily, mandatory had to be a monumental misunderstanding. A grotesque case of mistaken identity, an impossible but real confusion that was putting at risk 2 professional careers built with years of dedication, sacrifice, and demonstrated competence. I strategically found him in the hallway near the panoramic elevators during the sacred lunch hour between noon and 1 o'clock, when the absolute majority of employees were in the subsidized corporate cafeteria on the ground floor or in expensive nearby restaurants networking and politicking, providing some precious privacy for an extremely delicate, potentially explosive, and definitely determining conversation for the future of our careers and reputations. Raphael was undeniably an attractive man in the classic executive style of 38 years, always impeccably dressed in well-tailored Italian suits that cost more than many monthly salaries, and that highlighted his athletic posture, maintained with a personal trainer and premium gym. Known in the office both for his professional competence demonstrated in complex audits and for his discreetly melancholic personal life after a recent and traumatic divorce that had left him emotionally vulnerable, financially compromised, and understandably cautious about new romantic relationships. Raphael, please, we need to talk urgently, immediately. Critically about these completely inappropriate and disturbing messages that you're sending me through the corporate system that is monitored and could result in dismissal for just cause. There is some terrible, monstrous, incomprehensible mistake happening here because I swear by my father's memory, by my career, by my mental sanity that I never, ever, under any circumstances, had intimate conversations with you beyond strictly professional discussions about spreadsheets and regulations, never sent personal photos that weren't from the human resources file, never promised absolutely anything beyond basic professional courtesy and collaboration on projects when necessary. I began in a low voice but trembling with barely contained emotional intensity, observing through eyes that were beginning to tear up from stress, his facial expression going through a devastating emotional roller coaster. First anxious and passionate hope that I was finally breaking the professional disguise, then genuine and growing confusion when he realized my denial was real and not pretending, and finally something close to existential horror of someone who begins to question their own perception of reality. His blue eyes, normally confident, determined and slightly arrogant during corporate presentations where he demonstrated impressive technical mastery, now showed a disturbing, almost childlike vulnerability, mixed with profound disbelief at my apparent categorical denial of months of virtual intimacy that he clearly believed with every fiber of his being to have been real, reciprocated, and mutually desired. Carolina, I don't understand, I don't comprehend, I can't process why you're acting like this, denying our history, pretending nothing happened. We literally spent months, hundreds of hours, thousands of messages building a special, unique, transformative connection through private messages that went until dawn, sharing secrets I've never told anyone, fantasies I didn't even know I had, promises of a future that gave me hope after the hell of my divorce. You explicitly, repeatedly, passionately told me that you were deeply in love with me, but that we needed to maintain absolute secrecy because of the company's strict policies on relationships between colleagues, that we should wait for the right moment when one of us changed departments or companies. He responded with a voice breaking with emotion, removing with visibly trembling hands his latest model cell phone from the inside pocket of his suit jacket. What Raphael showed me on the high-definition screen of his sophisticated cell phone that probably cost more than many computers made my carefully constructed professional world and already fragile personal life collapse simultaneously, catastrophically, apparently irreversibly. There were literally hundreds, possibly thousands of messages exchanged through a popular social network that everyone used but which I had deliberately avoided to maintain separation between personal and professional life, all coming from an elaborate profile with my full name including middle name that few knew. My recent photos including some that I was absolutely certain I had never posted online, detailed professional information including confidential projects I was working on, and especially a level of authenticity in writing mannerisms, word choice, sentence structure, and even characteristic typing errors that would make it impossible for any reasonable person to doubt they were really talking to me, the real Carolina, not an imposter. The messages began apparently innocent about 6 months ago, with casual comments about work, complaints about the broken coffee machine, observations about shared projects and office politics, but gradually, insidiously, methodically evolved into deep personal confessions about my supposed painful divorce that had left me emotionally destroyed and distrustful of relationships, my devastating loneliness living alone in a large apartment that echoed with memories of happier times, my desperate but repressed desire for genuine emotional connection with someone who understood the pressures of our profession, and eventually, inevitably, predictably explicit and progressively more graphic declarations of overwhelming physical attraction to Raphael that made me blush with deep embarrassment and physical nausea reading on his phone screen while he held the device between us as irrefutable evidence of a relationship that never existed. Raphael, I swear by my professional life, personal life, my mental sanity, and the memory of everything sacred, that it's not me in these messages. It cannot be me. It's impossible to be me. Someone with deep knowledge about my life created an elaborate fake profile using my real identity and is impersonating me to seduce you, and probably, considering the elaboration and dedication involved, other colleagues too in some sick scheme that I don't yet fully understand. I explained with a trembling voice I barely recognized as my own, feeling the devastating, crushing, suffocating weight of the situation becoming progressively clearer, like a toxic fog dissipating to reveal a devastated battlefield. The expression on Raphael's face went through an emotional roller coaster that would be comical in other circumstances, but was now simply tragic. First, absolute disbelief that he could have been so elaborately deceived, then growing and justified anger at having been emotionally manipulated for months, then deep and devastating humiliation for having shared intimacies, secrets and vulnerabilities with an unknown person who could do anything with that information, and finally a complex and indefinable mixture of relief at understanding he hadn't been rejected by the real woman he professionally admired, and genuine concern about the catastrophic professional implications of being involved in that embarrassing situation that would certainly spread through the office like wildfire in dry straw. Together, still in the increasingly busy hallway as employees returned from lunch chatting animatedly about trivialities while we dealt with the potential end of our careers, we began to examine with forensic detail the fake profile that had been created with my identity, discovering progressive, meticulous, obsessive layers of criminal elaboration that demonstrated not only meticulous long-term planning, but disturbing intimate knowledge of my personal life that should have been private and inaccessible. The profile contained dozens of my photos that I recognized with growing horror from private family events that had never been publicly posted. Sunday barbecues at my uncle's house, intimate birthdays with few guests, personal trips to small towns that I had shared only with close relatives through private WhatsApp groups with encryption that supposedly protected privacy. Images that definitely, categorically, absolutely, were not publicly available on any digital platform accessible to strangers, hackers, or the curious. Even more disturbing, nauseating, and revealing was the obsessive level of detail in the personal information that the imposter demonstrated knowing. The fake profile knew my specific hobbies, including my secret collection of first editions of Brazilian books, my favorite restaurants, including an obscure Japanese one that only took reservations, books I was currently reading, including embarrassing self-help titles I hid from colleagues, series I compulsively watched, including reality shows I would publicly deny watching, even intimate details about my complicated, toxic, and codependent relationship with my mother Helena that I rarely, reluctantly, painfully discussed with anyone outside my intimate circle of friends I could count on one hand and still have fingers left over. Carolina, I need to, unfortunately, regrettably, urgently show you something even more concerning, disturbing, and potentially catastrophic for your career and reputation, said Raphael after a few minutes frantically navigating through the message history with fingers that demonstrated growing agitation and dread of what he was discovering. You weren't. The imposter using your identity wasn't just talking to me. You were also simultaneously conversing, apparently with the same intensity and similar promises, with Marcos from senior management who has decision-making power over promotions and dismissals, Pedro from the legal department who could create serious legal problems, even with some important company clients who represent millions in annual contracts and whose loss could result in mass layoffs. My blood froze in my veins in a physical sensation of pure terror, while my mind tried to process the magnitude of the conspiracy. This wasn't an isolated incident of harassment or misunderstanding, but rather a systematic, organized, and meticulously executed campaign of mass virtual seduction using my respected professional identity, putting at risk not just my already compromised personal reputation, but potentially my entire career, professional future in any company in the sector, and even the integrity of vital commercial relationships of the company where I worked, that moved hundreds of millions of reais annually. The informal but intensive investigation that Raphael and I discreetly conducted during the following 2 most distressing hours of my professional life, pretending to work on our computers while navigating on personal devices, obsessively tracking the extent of the problem through careful searches on multiple social networks and cautious conversations with other colleagues, revealed a disturbing, specific, and revealing pattern that began to awaken terrible suspicions that my conscious mind struggled to repress, but that my subconscious had already identified. The fake profile had been created exactly 8 months ago, not approximately but precisely, coinciding with surgical precision, with the period when my mother Helena had temporarily, but increasingly permanently, moved into my 3-bedroom apartment in MoMA after her forced retirement from work as an executive secretary in a company that went bankrupt, claiming devastating loneliness, post-retirement depression, and desperate need for family company, while adapting to the new phase of life without the professional routine that had structured her existence for 4 decades. During this period of forced cohabitation that I had accepted out of filial guilt and social pressure, Helena had demonstrated unusual, obsessive, and retrospectively suspicious interest in my professional life that she had previously completely ignored, asking detailed questions about work colleagues, including marital status and financial situation, organizational structure of the company, including who had real power versus empty titles, projects under development, including confidential information I shouldn't share, information that I naively, stupidly, irresponsibly shared, thinking she was just trying to stay mentally active and relevant after decades of corporate work that defined her identity and were now lost forever. The terrible connection became impossible to ignore, deny, or rationalize when I realized with devastating clarity that the personal photos used in the fake profile were exactly, precisely, exclusively those that Helena had obsessively insisted on taking during our moments together, that she artificially orchestrated, always with elaborate excuses about wanting to register precious special memories of her dear daughter before time passes, or learn to better use the new phone with professional camera that she had inexplicably purchased despite constantly complaining about financial difficulties. She had unlimited, unrestricted, and unsupervised access to my apartment for months, to my personal documents stored in drawers that I naively didn't lock, to my personal computer when I was at work for 10 hours daily, and most importantly, she had observed with obsessive attention my routine in detail for months like a scientist studying a specimen, learning my morning and evening habits, food and entertainment preferences, verbal and physical mannerisms, behavior and reaction patterns, absolutely everything that would be necessary to convincingly impersonate my identity online for people who knew me only superficially from the professional environment and wouldn't notice subtle inconsistencies that close friends would immediately identify. The reality that my own mother had created an elaborate fake profile to systematically seduce colleagues and important clients of the company hit me like an avalanche of ice, instantly freezing any remnant of naive hope that there could be another, less devastating explanation for that surreal situation. Raphael remained by my side in the corridor of the 20th floor, holding his cell phone with the hundreds of messages exchanged with the fake profile, while I struggled to process the magnitude of the conspiracy that had been orchestrated against me for months, without my having the slightest suspicion that something so monstrous was happening literally under my own roof. Carolina, I need you to know that I'm not furious with you personally, because now I understand that you're also a victim in this completely insane situation, said Raphael after a few minutes of awkward silence, his voice showing a complex mixture of relief at not having been rejected and horror at the manipulation to which he had been subjected. But you need to understand that I developed genuine feelings during these months of conversations. Feelings for a version of you that apparently never existed, but that seemed so real, so authentic, so perfectly compatible with everything I've always looked for in a partner. His words revealed the depth of the psychological damage that Helena had caused not only to me, but to multiple collateral victims who had been emotionally seduced by an elaborate fiction. At that moment, I made the most difficult decision of my 7-year professional life at that multinational company. I needed to fully expose the situation to senior management and the human resources department, assuming the devastating risk that my meticulously built professional reputation would be permanently stained by association with this scandal, even though I was the main victim. Raphael, we need to document absolutely everything before taking this to the board. Screenshots of all conversations, time logs, IP addresses if possible, any evidence that proves I wasn't the person behind these messages, I said with determination that arose from the need for professional survival. And mainly, we need to find out exactly how many people were affected by this sick scheme. During the following 3 hours, Raphael and I worked as improvised digital detectives in an empty meeting room on the 18th floor, compiling evidence through our personal devices while pretending to be in a legitimate work meeting to avoid arousing suspicion from colleagues passing by the glass corridors. The investigation revealed progressively more disturbing dimensions of the scheme. The fake profile had simultaneously conversed with at least 12 different people from the company, including Marcos, our 42-year-old department head who had direct power over promotions and dismissals, Pedro from legal, who could create devastating legal problems, and especially 3 important clients who represented annual contracts worth millions of reais for the company. Carolina, this is criminal on multiple levels, Raphael observed as we navigated through conversations that became progressively more explicit and compromising. Your mother not only falsified your identity, but used confidential company information that you must have mentioned at home, details about confidential projects, information about executives' personal lives. She turned you into an involuntary corporate spy. The realization that Helena had used casual domestic conversations to extract sensitive information that she later used to make the fake profile more convincing added layers of betrayal that I hadn't even initially considered. The messages exchanged with Marcos were particularly concerning because they contained explicit promises of romantic encounters conditioned on favorable professional decisions, essentially configuring an attempt at sexual bribery that could result in termination for just cause and criminal charges. Marcos, my secret love, I know you have the power to promote me to the senior manager position I desire so much. Imagine how wonderful it would be to work even closer together, with daily private meetings where we could explore our special connection without the current restrictions, said one of the messages that made me feel physically nauseous. Helena had created a narrative where I was supposedly willing to exchange sexual favors for professional advancement, completely destroying my reputation for technical competence earned through genuine merit. The most devastating discovery came when we found conversations with 3 important company clients, executives from other corporations that the company provided consulting and auditing services to. The fake profile had shared with them information that could be interpreted as leaking confidential data, criticisms of the very company I worked for, and especially promises of special collaboration if they maintained or expanded their contracts. If you renew the contract for 3 more years, I can guarantee very special and personalized attention to your projects. I have unique ways of showing gratitude that you've never experienced with other consultants. Wrote the profile in messages that made me question whether Helena understood the magnitude of the corporate crimes she was committing using my identity. We need specialized legal help immediately, I declared after seeing the full extent of the disaster. This isn't just an internal human resources problem. We're talking about identity forgery, possible corporate espionage, attempted bribery, reverse sexual harassment, and who knows how many other crimes that a lawyer will need to classify. Raphael immediately agreed, and together we decided to first seek out Daniela, my only true friend in the company, who besides being a colleague in the finance department also had contacts in the legal world through her attorney husband. I found Daniela in the corporate cafeteria during the afternoon coffee break, sitting alone at a table near the panoramic windows that offered a spectacular view of the city, but at that moment seemed like a cruel metaphor for the professional downfall I was about to experience. Daniela was a 33-year-old black woman with a striking presence, natural curly hair that defied the company's conservative standards, and most importantly, a rare ability to combine exceptional professional competence with genuine human warmth in a corporate environment that was often cold and calculating. Daniela, I urgently need your help with a situation that could destroy my career and potentially send me to prison for crimes I didn't commit, I whispered after sitting beside her, nervously checking if anyone was close enough to hear our conversation. Her dark eyes immediately showed genuine concern, mixed with the focused attention of someone accustomed to solving complex problems. Carolina, you're shaking and pale as paper. What happened? Talk to me. We've been friends for 5 years, and you know you can trust me completely, she replied, holding my ice, cold hands between her warm ones. In the following 20 minutes, I related the entire surreal situation, while Daniela listened with increasingly horrified attention, occasionally asking specific questions to better understand the technical and legal details of what had happened. When I mentioned that I suspected Helena, I saw her eyes widen in sudden understanding. Carolina, now a lot of things make sense. In the past few weeks, I've been hearing strange rumors about you in the hallways, comments about changes in your behavior, insinuations about relationships with superiors. I thought it was just typical malicious office gossip, but now I realize it was the result of these fake conversations spreading throughout the company, she revealed, confirming my worst fears about reputation damage already in progress. You need Ricardo immediately, Daniela declared, already grabbing her cell phone to call her husband. He specializes in digital and corporate crimes, has already handled cases of online identity forgery, and most importantly, is discreet enough to manage this without turning it into a public scandal before necessary. Ricardo Ferreira was a legend in the corporate legal world. A 47-year-old lawyer known for solving complex cases involving white-collar crimes, digital frauds, and corporate disputes that could destroy careers and entire companies if poorly managed. The meeting with Ricardo happened that same night at his private office on the 42nd floor of a mirrored building in the city's financial center, a space that breathed power and competence with its mahogany bookshelves filled with legal codes, framed diplomas from prestigious universities, and a night view of the city that shone like a constellation of opportunities and dangers. Ricardo was exactly as I had imagined an elite lawyer. Brown hair strategically graying, analytical green eyes that seemed to process information at superhuman speed, and mainly a presence that combined professional authority with the calculated calm of someone who had seen the worst aspects of corporate human behavior. Ms. Carolina, from what Daniela has briefed me, we're dealing with a complex case of digital identity theft with potentially criminal corporate ramifications, he began after I handed over all the documents and digital evidence I had compiled with Raphael. The good news is that we have clear evidence that you are a victim, not a perpetrator. The bad news is that the damage to your professional reputation may be significant and lasting, even after we prove your innocence. His brutal honesty was simultaneously terrifying and comforting. At least I was dealing with someone who wouldn't minimize the gravity of the situation. Ricardo spent 2 hours meticulously analyzing each conversation, each timestamp, each technical detail that could be used both to defend me and to prosecute those responsible. There are elements here of multiple crimes. Digital identity forgery under Law 12-737, the Civil Framework for the Internet. Possible criminal conspiracy if your mother had help. Quantifiable moral and material damages. And mainly, if we can prove that confidential corporate information was shared, we may be talking about corporate espionage, he explained, typing notes on his laptop with impressive speed. But Dr. Ricardo, how do I prove that it wasn't me doing this myself? How do I demonstrate that my own mother created this elaborate scheme? I asked, feeling the weight of the situation become progressively more crushing. Ricardo adjusted his discreet framed glasses and looked at me directly. We'll need digital forensic technical expertise to track IP addresses, linguistic pattern analysis to demonstrate differences between your real writing and the imposters. And mainly, we'll need to confront your mother with evidence and hope that she confesses or makes mistakes that confirm her culpability. He outlined the strategy with military precision. The confrontation with Helena happened the next day, a Wednesday that began with a gray sky and fine drizzle that seemed to perfectly reflect my devastated emotional state. I arrived home at 7 in the morning, an hour before my usual time to leave for work, specifically to catch her off guard before she could prepare defenses or elaborate stories. Ricardo had instructed me to discreetly record the conversation using my cell phone, ensuring that it was legal in our state to record conversations in which we participate, especially when there is suspicion of a crime being investigated. I found Helena in the kitchen, preparing coffee with the naturalness of someone who hadn't just destroyed her own daughter's professional life. She was wearing a blue silk robe that I had given her as a gift last Christmas, her dyed blonde hair tied in a messy bun, and mainly maintained that expression of false innocence that I now recognized as an elaborate mask. "Good morning, daughter. You're up early today. Would you like me to prepare your special breakfast? I can make those pancakes you loved when you were a child," she said in a sugary voice that now sounded completely fake to my alert ears. "Helena," I began, purposefully using her name instead of Mom to establish the necessary emotional distance. "I need you to explain exactly why you created a fake profile with my identity and spent the last 8 months seducing my coworkers and systematically destroying my professional reputation." The transformation in her face was instantaneous and revealing. The mask of maternal innocence fell like broken porcelain, revealing first surprise at having been discovered, then something that seemed to be cold calculation about how to respond, and finally a pathetic attempt to feign confusion. Daughter, I don't know what you're talking about. What's this story about a fake profile? Are you okay? Are you having some kind of stress episode from work? She tried, but her trembling voice and the fact that she had dropped the coffee cup she was holding betrayed her obvious guilt. Please don't insult my intelligence by trying to gaslight me, I replied with a coldness that surprised me. I saw the photos of me you used in the profile. I recognize the ring I gave you in the bank recordings, and most importantly, intimate details about my life that only you know are spread throughout those disgusting conversations. Helena remained silent for exactly 43 seconds. I mentally counted each one while observing the micro-expressions on her face, revealing the mental process of someone realizing they had been completely unmasked. When she finally spoke, her voice had a different quality, harder, more calculated, almost unrecognizable compared to the mother I thought I knew. You've always been so proper, so perfect, so successful while I withered away in that tiny apartment after retirement, she began, finally revealing the venom she had apparently accumulated over years. Do you think it's easy for a mother to see her daughter earn 20 times more than she ever did? To see you waste opportunities that I would kill to have? Helena continued, her voice progressively rising in volume and bitterness. All those successful men around you at the office, any one of them could give you a life of luxury, but you prefer to stay alone with your projects and your independence, wasting your youth and beauty that won't last forever. The revelation that Helena had done all this through a sick combination of envy, greed, and some distorted vision that she was helping my love life left me temporarily speechless. Are you telling me that you destroyed my career because you think I should be using my body to get a rich husband? I asked, incredulous at the retrograde and mercenary mentality she was revealing. You threw away everything I built through honest work because you're jealous of my success and think women should sell themselves to men with money? It's not selling yourself, it's being smart, Helena exploded, finally completely abandoning any pretense of being a victim or innocent. I tried to teach you your whole life how the world really works, but you were always too stubborn, too idealistic, thinking technical competence is enough. Men don't fall in love with spreadsheets and projects, Carolina. They fall in love with women who know how to seduce them, manipulate them, make them feel special. Helena's next words revealed the full extent of her calculated sociopathy. So yes, I created that profile to show how easy it would be for you to get any man at that company if you simply tried. Raphael was completely in love. Marcos was willing to promote you. Even those important clients were interested. I accomplished in 8 months what you couldn't do in 7 years, creating romantic and professional opportunities using your attributes. You didn't create opportunities. You created a time bomb that's about to explode and take me with it, I shouted, completely losing the emotional control I had tried to maintain. You committed crimes, Helena. Real crimes with real legal consequences. Identity fraud, possible corporate espionage, fraud. You could go to prison and I could lose everything I've built even though I'm innocent. Helena seemed genuinely surprised at the mention of legal consequences, as if she hadn't considered that her actions could have ramifications beyond the fantasy world she had created in her distorted mind. Prison? Don't be dramatic, Carolina. It was just online conversation, innocent flirting, nobody was physically hurt, she began. But I interrupted her with a bitter laugh that I didn't recognize as my own. Innocent? You shared confidential company information. You made promises of sexual favors in exchange for promotions. You tried to bribe clients. Each of these things is a federal crime, Helena, and the company can sue me for information leaks even though I'm a victim. Because the conversations happened through my stolen identity, I explained, watching her face progressively pale as the reality of the consequences began to penetrate her delusional bubble. But I'm your mother, she said weakly, as if this biological fact could magically erase the crimes committed. You can't report me, we're family, I raised you, I gave you everything. The obvious emotional manipulation in her attempt to use our family bond as a shield against legal consequences filled me with a cold anger that crystallized my decision about how to proceed. You were my mother until the moment you decided to destroy my life out of envy and greed, I replied with an icy voice. Now you're just a criminal who happens to share my DNA. And yes, I will fully cooperate with any legal investigation because I prefer to see justice done rather than protect someone who has proven capable of betraying me in such a calculated and cruel way. Helena tried to approach me, probably to attempt a manipulative hug or crocodile tears, but I instinctively backed away. You have exactly 1 hour to pack your things and leave my apartment, I declared. And I suggest you find a competent criminal lawyer because you'll need one. All the evidence is already with my attorney, and tomorrow morning we'll formally register the case both with the company and the police. Carolina, please, let's talk about this calmly, she begged, but her voice no longer had power over me. Years of emotional conditioning to always forgive and protect my mother had been destroyed in a matter of hours by the magnitude of her betrayal. There's nothing to talk about. You made conscious choices for 8 months, executing an elaborate plan that required premeditation, dedication, and complete disregard for my well-being. Now you'll face the consequences of those choices. While Helena packed her things in the guest room she had occupied as an emotional and now literal parasite for almost a year, I remained in the living room monitoring her movements to ensure she wouldn't try to destroy evidence or steal anything additional. It was surreal to watch the woman who had raised me reduced to a pathetic figure dragging suitcases down the hallway, muttering curses and accusations of ingratitude that only confirmed her complete lack of remorse or understanding of the gravity of her actions. Before leaving for good, Helena turned to me one last time at the doorway. One day you'll understand that everything I did was out of love, Carolina. Distorted love, perhaps, but love. I just wanted to see you happy, married, secure with a man who could take care of you, she said, still trying to justify the unjustifiable. If that was love, I prefer hatred, I responded, closing the door in her face with a finality that reverberated through the empty apartment. As soon as Helena left, I collapsed on the sofa and cried like I hadn't since childhood. Tears of anger, betrayal, relief, and mostly grief for the mother I thought I had, but who probably never existed, except in my hopeful imagination. The apartment seemed simultaneously larger and emptier, as if her toxic presence had occupied more space than her physical body. Every corner held memories now contaminated. The dining table where we had shared meals while she extracted information to use in her scheme. The couch where we watched movies while she studied my mannerisms to imitate them online. The balcony where we had coffee while she probably planned the next victim of digital seduction. The emergency meeting with the company's board took place the following Thursday, in a conference room on the 30th floor that was normally reserved for corporate decisions worth millions, not personal scandals threatening the company's reputation. I was accompanied by Ricardo, who had prepared a meticulous presentation with all evidence organized chronologically, technical proof of identity forgery, and primarily a legal strategy to protect both my interests and the company's against possible lawsuits from affected clients or employees. The polished mahogany oval table was occupied by faces I normally only saw in annual meetings. The CEO, Marcus Steinberg, a 60-year-old German with a reputation for resolving crises with surgical efficiency. The HR director, Patricia Chen, known for her rigorous but fair approach to delicate situations. The legal director, Dr. Antonio Silveira, a veteran of corporate scandals. And especially my direct boss, Marcos Ribeiro, who had maintained an indecipherable expression since discovering he was one of the victims of the seduction scheme. Ladies and gentlemen, Ricardo began with his professional voice that commanded attention. What we are about to present is an unprecedented case of digital identity theft with serious corporate ramifications, where my client, Carolina Santos, was the victim of an elaborate scheme executed by a member of her own family. The presentation lasted exactly 53 minutes, during which the silence in the room was so absolute that you could hear the central air conditioning and the distant traffic 30 floors below. The reactions varied as the evidence was presented. Patricia Chen was furiously taking notes about security protocols that would need to be revised. Dr. Silveira was mentally calculating the company's legal exposure. Marcus Steinberg kept his face impassive except for a vein on his temple that pulsated visibly. But it was Marcos's reaction that impacted me the most. A mixture of embarrassment, anger, and something that seemed to be relief at discovering that the rejection he had experienced was from an imposter, not from the real woman he respected professionally. Mrs. Santos, Marcus Steinberg began after Ricardo concluded the presentation, his voice carrying the German accent that intensified in moments of stress. First, I want to express that the company recognizes you as a victim in this situation. Second, we need to discuss how to minimize damage both to your career and to the company's reputation. His words were carefully chosen, clearly the result of prior consultation with the legal department about how to address the situation without admitting corporate security failures that could result in lawsuits. Patricia Chen took the floor next. From a human resources perspective, we will need to conduct a full internal investigation, Interview all affected employees, and most importantly, implement protocols to prevent similar situations in the future. Carolina, unfortunately, this means that you will need to be temporarily removed, with full pay, of course, while the investigation proceeds. The removal, although understandable, felt like additional punishment for crimes I did not commit. I understand the need for protocol, I responded, maintaining professionalism despite the injustice. But I would like guarantees that my professional reputation will be actively protected and restored after the conclusion of the investigation. Dr. Silvera intervened. The company has an interest in protecting your reputation, Mrs. Santos, because any damage to your credibility could be used against us in future lawsuits. We will issue internal communications clarifying the situation as soon as the investigation confirms the facts, and we will provide full legal support for any criminal action against the perpetrators. Marcos, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke, his voice demonstrating the emotional conflict he was experiencing. Carolina, I need to apologize. During these months, I developed feelings that I believed were reciprocated. Now I realize I was manipulated, but that doesn't diminish the embarrassment and unprofessional behavior I demonstrated based on these false premises. His honest admission was simultaneously courageous and uncomfortable, revealing how Helena's actions had created a web of embarrassments and misunderstandings that would affect professional dynamics for years. Marcos, you don't need to apologize for having been a victim of elaborate manipulation, I replied, trying to alleviate the obvious embarrassment. Everyone who interacted with the fake profile was deceived by someone with access to intimate information and a sick motivation to make the fraud convincing. The following 2 weeks were a purgatory of forced isolation, while the corporate and police investigations proceeded simultaneously. My apartment, previously a refuge from professional stress, became a golden prison where every object reminded me of maternal betrayal. I spent entire days working with Ricardo and his team, providing passwords, access, browsing histories, a necessary invasion of privacy to prove my innocence. Detective Lima, responsible for the criminal investigation, was a 39-year-old digital crime specialist who seemed to live in front of computer screens, evidenced by his paleness and high-grade glasses. Mrs. Carolina, we were able to trace the IPs accessing the fake profile. They all originate from devices that were in your apartment during the period in question, confirming that your mother had the necessary physical access, he explained during one of many testimony sessions. The forensic linguistic analysis revealed subtle but significant differences between my real writing and the imposters. There are consistent patterns that diverge from your natural style, explained the expert, Dr. Amanda Rossi. The imposter uses more colloquial constructions, more exclamation points, and mainly demonstrates a superficial knowledge of technical terms that you would completely master. It's clearly someone trying to imitate your professional knowledge without actually possessing it. During this investigation period, I discovered that Helena had been even more meticulous and cruel than I had imagined. She had created fake bank accounts to receive gifts that some of the seduced men had tried to send, diverting funds totaling almost 50,000 reais. The money had been spent on cosmetic treatments, expensive clothes, and mainly transfers to a man named Roberto Diaz, apparently a 62-year-old professional scammer who had approached Helena promising miraculous investments and who was probably the true intellectual mastermind behind the scheme. Your mother was simultaneously perpetrator and victim, Detective Lima observed after discovering the connection with Roberto. This man has a history of manipulating older, lonely women with access to resources or family members with resources. He probably identified you as a target through Helena and convinced her that the scheme was a way to get money for investments that would make them rich. The revelation that Helena had been partially manipulated didn't diminish my anger, but added a layer of pathetic tragedy to the situation. She had destroyed our relationship and my career not only out of jealousy and self-interest, but also for having been stupid enough to believe an obvious scammer who saw her merely as a tool to access resources. Roberto Diaz was arrested 3 weeks after the investigation began, found in a luxury apartment in Balneario Camboriú that he had rented with the stolen money. On his computer, police found evidence of similar schemes with 7 other women in different states, all following the same pattern: seducing older women, convincing them to compromise family members with resources, and disappearing with the obtained money. Helena was arrested on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 month after our confrontation in the kitchen. I wasn't present, but Detective Lima called to inform me that she had been detained in a cheap hotel in the South Zone where she was staying, and that she had cried and screamed throughout the arrest, alternating between calling me an ungrateful daughter and begging for forgiveness. Bail was denied due to flight risk and the severity of the crimes: identity forgery, fraud, criminal association, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The first court hearing took place 2 months later, on an exceptionally hot May day that made the courthouse air conditioning work noisily. Seeing Helena handcuffed, wearing the beige uniform of the prison system, was a visual shock that hit me unexpectedly. The woman who had raised me, educated me, shared decades of life, reduced to a common criminal awaiting trial. She tried to make eye contact with me several times during the hearing, her eyes alternating between plea and accusation, but I kept my gaze fixed on the judge or on Ricardo. Not out of cruelty, but self-preservation. I knew any emotional connection could weaken my determination to seek complete justice. Helena's testimony was a masterclass in emotional manipulation and denial of responsibility. She painted herself as Roberto's victim, a desperate mother trying to help her daughter, an elderly woman confused by modern technology. "I just wanted Carolina to be happy," she repeated between theatrical sobs. Roberto told me he was helping create romantic opportunities for her, that this was how these modern dating apps worked. The prosecutor, Dr. Fernando Bastos, systematically demolished her defenses with concrete evidence. "Mrs. Helena, we have records that you practiced your daughter's signature for weeks. We have messages where you clearly demonstrate knowledge that you were committing fraud. We have evidence that you received and spent money obtained through these frauds. This isn't technological confusion. It's premeditated crime." The most impactful moment was when they played recordings of calls between Helena and Roberto, where she demonstrated complete knowledge of the scheme, discussing strategies to make the profile more convincing, celebrating successes in seducing victims, and mainly planning how to extract more money. Her voice in the recordings was unrecognizable, cold, calculating, completely different from the loving mother I thought I knew. Roberto, in his testimony, was even more revealing. Without any loyalty to Helena now that he had been arrested, he detailed how he had identified her as the perfect target. "A bitter old woman jealous of her successful daughter," were his exact words. He described how easy it was to convince her that Carolina didn't deserve her success, that she was wasting opportunities, that they could split the profits from the scheme. The sentence came 3 weeks later. Helena got 4 years in prison in an initial closed regime for aggravated fraud, document forgery, and criminal association. Roberto received 8 years for being a repeat offender and leader of the scheme. When the sentence was read, Helena dramatically fainted, needing to be supported by guards. I don't know if it was theater or genuine shock. At this point, I could no longer distinguish truth from performance in the woman who raised me. After concluding the internal investigation, the company offered me 2 options: return to my position with written guarantees that there would be no professional harm, or a termination agreement with substantial compensation and impeccable references. I chose the second option. Even though exonerated, I knew that the looks, whispers, and residual embarrassment would make it impossible to rebuild my reputation in that environment. With the compensation and accumulated savings, I decided to do something I would never have had the courage to do before. I opened my own financial consulting office. Small, just me and 2 assistants initially, but mine. A place where I could rebuild my professional identity away from the shadows of scandal. The first year was brutal. Potential clients would Google my name and find news about the case. Some canceled meetings, others came out of morbid curiosity. But gradually, the quality of my work spoke louder than the scandal. I won loyal clients who valued competence over gossip, professionalism over sensationalism. Daniela continued to be my friend and greatest supporter. She left the company 6 months after me and joined my office as a partner. "You survived the unthinkable and you're still standing," she said the day we signed the partnership. "If that doesn't prove your strength and integrity, nothing does." Raphael also kept in touch. Initially uncomfortable, but gradually evolving into genuine friendship. "We were both victims of the same manipulation," he said during a coffee 2 years after the incident. "That creates a strange but real bond." He ended up becoming one of my best clients, bringing all the accounting for the startup he opened after also leaving the company. I received exactly 3 letters from Helena from prison. The first, 6 months after her conviction, was 20 pages of justifications, accusations, and pleas for forgiveness. The second, a year later, was shorter and bitter, blaming me for her situation. The third, arriving recently after 2.5 years of silence, was just 1 line. "I hope you have found the happiness that I tried to give you in my wrong way." I didn't answer any of them. not out of anger. The anger had dissipated over time, replaced by a quiet sadness and acceptance. I didn't respond because there was nothing to say. Helena made choices that destroyed any possibility of a future relationship. Some betrayals are too great for forgiveness, too deep for reconciliation. Today, 4 years after that fateful morning when the messages appeared on my screen, I run a successful consulting firm with 12 employees. I live in a new apartment without contaminated memories. I have a healthy relationship with a man I met through mutual friends, not through digital manipulations. Someone who knew the whole story on our second date and decided it was worth getting to know the real woman, not the victim of the scandal. Sometimes I think about Helena, wonder how she is, if Roberto still manipulates her from prison, if she finally understood the magnitude of what she did. But these are passing thoughts, like remembering a bad dream that no longer has power over the present. She taught me through the worst possible example that trust must be earned and maintained through consistent actions, not assumed through blood ties. The greatest irony is that Helena was partially right about one thing. I was really wasting opportunities, but not the ones she imagined. I was wasting the opportunity to live authentically, to take professional risks, to free myself from suffocating corporate expectations. Her betrayal, as devastating as it was, forced me to rebuild my life on my own terms. I am not grateful for what she did. It would be sick to be grateful for betrayal and crimes. But I recognize that surviving that experience transformed me into someone stronger, wiser, more capable of identifying and avoiding toxic people. I learned that family is not a biological obligation, but a conscious choice of people who demonstrate love through mutual respect, support, and protection. Helena will be released in 6 months, with time reduced for good behavior. Ricardo informed me that she will have to maintain legal distance from me. A permanent restraining order was included as a condition of parole. I don't know where she will go, how she will live, if she will try to contact me despite the legal prohibition. And honestly, I don't care. My story is not about forgiveness or touching family reconciliation. It's about survival, rebuilding, and the courage to cut toxic ties even when they come in the form of those who should protect us above all else. It's about learning that self-love sometimes means saying no to the destructive love of others, even when that other gave birth to you. If Helena appears at my door when she's released, I won't open it. Not out of hatred, but out of wisdom. Some doors, once closed, should remain that way. Some people, once revealed as snakes, don't deserve a second chance to bite. And some daughters need to become emotional orphans to finally grow free. Did you like Carolina's story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where you're watching from. Oh, and there's another story waiting for you here on the screen. Click there and I'll be waiting for you.